Okay, in this lesson, what we're going to be doing is taking a look at texturing basics. We're going to be looking at the texture browser. Now, I know we have been looking at it throughout this VTM, but this time we're going to look at just a few more of the options available to us. We'll also take a look at assigning textures. I know we've also seen that, but we're going to look at a few other nifty shortcuts that can be very helpful. We'll also look at texture aligning. And then finally, we'll go back into the level that we've been working on throughout the last few lessons and texture it. So, Logan, let's go ahead and load up the texture browser to begin with.
Okay.
And up at the top, we've got a menu bar. Okay. And from there, the first thing I want to talk about is just view. So if we go and click on view, then up underneath here, you'll see we've got this 100%, 200%, et cetera, et cetera. And right now, we see 128 by 128 checked. And what that means is basically we're constraining all of our textures right now to 128 pixels by 128 pixels. And this can be really convenient because there's some very, very high-resolution textures that come with Unreal Tournament 2003. And Logan, if you go ahead and go on up to the 100%, you see what I mean? That's big, okay? So it can be very convenient to go ahead and lock a particular size, such as 128 by 128. Okay, now let's go ahead and come down to the toolbar area. And inside the toolbar area, one main thing that we've been looking at is the open packages. And so you know that this is how we go in and open packages. Coming down from there, we've got 3 different tabs that we can select. By the way, I am skipping a bunch of different things because we're limited on time, and a lot of these different options are not necessarily relevant to what we're doing at the moment. We'll be exploring them a little bit later in time as we become a little bit more advanced in the content that's being delivered for these VTMs. Now, full, in-use, and MRU. What that means is basically full is going to show us all of our textures down below in the package based on how it's categorized and what category or group is currently selected. Where right now we're looking in the humanoid architecture package, we're looking at all of the textures that's in the basis group. Now, if we go up and click on in use, what this is going to do is show us all of the textures that are currently in use inside our map right now. And in the MRU is the most recently used textures, and there's a list of all of the ones that we've used most recently. So far, Logan, pretty good?
Yep, so far so simple.
Okay, so right now, if we want to, we can come down to the humanoid architecture drop down. If we click on that, we'll see that we've got various packages that we've already loaded in the scene, and of course ones that come loaded by default. And then down from there, we can, as I said a second ago, break it down further into particular groups within that package, just as a way of filtering through our textures. We also have the ability to click the All button over on the left-hand side, and this will show us all of the textures in that particular package. And speaking of filtering, even though we've already missed it once, just in case anybody out there missed one of these lessons, you'll notice at the very bottom, filter with a text field, where you can go in there and start typing in, go ahead and type something in. So BAS, he hits enter. There's nothing that starts with BAS. There we go, 04. So there's everything with 04 in it. Okay? So make sure he goes and clears that back out first. There you go. So that we're seeing everything again. And let me go and get you to switch over to the AW Globals real quick. Just want to go ahead and show them an animated shader as well. And from there, let's go ahead and, switch over to shaders and turn on animated. Okay, and this will show you any animated shaders that we have going on inside the view of the texture browser as well. So you can see that these guys are now animated. And if he clicks and turns off the exclamation mark, and now you can see that they are no longer animated. Okay? All right, Logan, anything else that you can think of that we need to hit while in this area?
And that's a good overview of the texture browser.
Okay, so from there, one last thing I can say that I guess could be helpful is you'll notice the left and right arrows kind of like fast forward and rewind type buttons up there. These just allow you to walk through the different groups within your actual package that you've got open. You may find that convenient as well. All right, so with that, Logan, let's go ahead now and spend just a minute and talk about some of the different ways that we can assign textures back into our map. Now, right now, we already know that we can go in there and we can simply click on one of those faces and then come back over in the texture browser and select a texture and it will apply it. But let's talk about some of the other ways we can go about doing it.
Okay, well, let me apply a different texture just so we can see the differences here. So one other way you could grab a texture is, say you didn't even have the texture browser open at the moment, and you wanted to grab this texture and apply it to different faces. You could hold Alt and right-click on the texture that you want, and then hold Alt and left-click where you want to place that texture. So Alt and click on that surface, and so on.
Now, I have seen some people on the internet say that just hold Alt button down and that you may need to try it over and over again sometimes if it doesn't catch. But we found that if you hold Alt down and then right-click and let go of the Alt button after you've right-clicked and then press Alt again and left-click, it works every single time.
Right.
Okay. Logan, I guess another thing we could show is easy ways in selecting multiple faces so when we go to actually do an assignment.
Right. Shortcuts to selecting. Say you wanted to grab every single face on this brush. You could simply click on a single face and then hit Shift-B, and you grab every face belonging to that brush.
Okay, very nice.
Also, if you wanted to grab every face that had this texture applied to it, you could use Shift-T.
Very nice. And we can go ahead and point out that Shift-S will also just simply select all of your faces. Okay, very good. All right, anything else that you can think of as far as assignment is concerned that they may be interested in seeing right now?
That should be it.
Okay, so let's go ahead now and advance into texture alignment.
Okay. First, let me set this face back to one of these floor type ones. So, of course, Alt-right, Alt-left. And from... looks like the angle could be important, too. If that one was more dead on, that one was at an angle.
So we may have just been getting lucky where it's worked for us every single time, and we just may have had a good angle every single time.
Quite possible.
That would be very funny.
Okay. So now if we want to start taking a look at some alignment abilities, we could right-click to bring up the surface properties. And first, let's take a look at doing just some simple panning, maybe some simple scaling.
Actually, before we do that, let's take just a second and talk about the surface properties dialog. Inside this dialog, you'll notice it's broken down into 4 major categories. What we've got is flags, pan, rotate, scale, alignment, and stats. And we're not going to be getting into flags and stats in this particular VTM. Those are things we'll look at later. But right now, we're going to be using the pan, rotate, and scale tab and the alignment tab to be controlling how these textures are actually aligned on these faces.
Right. So if you wanted to do just simple panning based on a number of units, you could use the pan buttons. If you click one, you'll see a little bit of panning. Let me click one to move it more. And if you want to pan in the opposite direction, simply hold Shift and then click that button. And you notice if I click different amounts, of course, it will pan that many units.
And for those out there that are not familiar with UV space, of course, that is the coordinate system that we're dealing with because a texture lies flat on an object. We're no longer dealing with an X, Y, Z type coordinate, and that's why you're seeing these U's and V's everywhere. Basically, U is going to be running in one direction and V is going to be running in the other. Again, I'm just throwing that out there as a tip for those that may not be familiar with UV coordinates.
Right. If I had clicked the buttons that went along with U, you could see that it's moving horizontally instead of vertically.
Excellent.
Okay. If you need to do some scaling, you can simply grab, if you wanted to, say, make this tile twice as much, we could set the scaling to 0.5 and apply it. And let's see. It already was. 1, apply. Yeah, it was already scaled down. So if we set it to 0.2, that would really tile.
Yeah,
or we could bring it all the way up to 2, and that would stretch it more.
Very stretched.
Or
Absolutely.
set it back to 1.
Okay.
If we need to scale the U and V independently, of course we can come down to these two boxes, like, say, stretch V twice as much, or stretch U twice as much.
Very nice.
Or set them back to 1.
Okay. And what about the rotation buttons up there?
If you want to rotate along a 45 or 90 degree angle, simply click 45. Or if you need to rotate in the opposite direction, like to, in a sense, undo that or just go backwards, you can hold Shift and go back 45, go back 45 some more, let go of Shift, go forward 45 again. You get the idea.
Okay, very good.
So, same thing with 90. Rotate 90 or Shift rotate to go back 90.
All right, and the flip U and flip V will do exactly what it says. It will basically take the texture and flip it along that coordinate.
Shift to flip it back, flip U, flips horizontally.
Okay, very good. So next thing, before we move out of this tab right here, let's go ahead and talk about the texture pan and the texture rotate as they are closely related to what we're doing, except it's an interactive way that we can go about doing it with the mouse.
If you wanted more of a freehand method of, say, panning a texture, you could come down to Texture Pan and then hold Control and left drag if you wanted to pan in U, or Control and right drag if you wanted to pan in V. Also, if you want to adjust scaling while in texture pan mode, you could hold Control and use both mouse buttons, and it will actually let you adjust the scaling.
Very nice. Okay, and we also have the ability to do texture rotate as well with the mouse.
So just Control, left drag, and then you can do a freehand rotate.
Yep, and that's the same with both the left and the right mouse button. Okay, very good. So now let's go ahead and take a look at some of these automatic alignment methods.
Okay.
Some of the various texture projection methods that are available include planar, box, and face. And it's just different ways that the system will map on that texture to that particular face. And Logan, you want to go ahead and start walking through what we have?
Okay. Well, if we wanted to go ahead and say grab these two faces and try aligning them now.
Absolutely.
We could come up to planar and let it automatically pick the axes to align on, and let me set these to 1 and 1.
Yeah, our tiling there.
And say align. And there, it's grabbed the texture, and now it's perfectly aligned.
Wow, take a look at that. It looks like one solid long wall now.
Exactly.
Okay. And just different ones. Planar would be a planar projection. Box would be coming in from all sides of a box, basically. And face, actually with planar, let's do one other thing. Let's go ahead and change the axis, just so we can show what happens if it's being struck from an axis that is, let's say, X.
Right.
So that what will happen is basically we're going to end up with streaks.
Yes, so set it to X and align. Notice how the streaks are running along the X-axis.
That's because we just did a planar projection. If you want to look at it from the left-hand side, running perpendicular to this wall. And so basically the pixel colors that struck right there on the edge just got smeared all the way down. So it's a good idea to just take this and we can go down there and put it on auto.
So, or you could put it on Y, which should project straight onto it, as you can see Y down there. Or leave it at auto, and of course, it grabs it automatically.
Okay. And in box and face, any comments you want to add about that?
Not really.
Face can be really handy sometimes, depending on what you're working with. And we may end up using that one when we get over into the actual texturing of our level itself. Okay, so these are just some automatic alignments. If you want to, real quick, Logan, go ahead and throw some additional textures on those 3 walls down there. Something with a bottom border and a top border, and let's take a quick look at aligning them.
Okay. Let me load up the texture browser again, and let me switch to walls. Walls category of humanoid architecture.
Yeah, there we go. Now we're getting into some interesting stuff.
And let's grab, say, this one.
Okay.
And grab that face and apply it. Now, that's not quite... It's not scaled right, and it doesn't even look like it's flipped right. So let's go mess around with that a little and see if we can get that to align. First, let's just see if some of the automatic tools will allow it to align correctly. Say if we go and grab a face and set the tiling to 1 and 1 and set align, and then it would align it to that face, but now the rotation's off. So then we could come over to rotate and say rotate it 90 degrees. Well, that was the wrong way, so if I held shift, I could bring it back. Holding shift, I can bring it back one more. And there, now it's aligned properly.
Oh, very nice.
Now,
and using the little Alt left click Alt or Alt right click Alt left click, we could quickly assign that to these other walls as well. Okay. Now we need to simply go in there and align them.
Okay. Instead of just using the align button again, let me bring up the texture browser just to point out one thing. This texture is 1024 by 1024. This cube I'm working in is 512 by 512, which would mean that theoretically, if we wanted to align this, we should set the scaling to 0.5, which
does an excellent job. Very nice.
So you can apply the same to the other wall, but that's not.
But that one yet has not had any type of projection assigned to it, so we need to go in there and do some sort of alignment or pan it by hand.
Yeah, or if all else fails somehow and you just need to go in there and by hand, you can simply keep clicking on the pan buttons until you get something that matches up. Notice how that last one went maybe just a hair too far, so you could use shift on 1 until.
Look at that! Isn't that just nice?
So you've got fully automatic, mostly automatic with knowledge of what to scale, and then by hand. Okay,
so that's just a real quick look at the texture browser, assigning textures, and texture alignments. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and close some of these dialogues down. And it's going to be a quick cut on the video here because we're going to go in and actually open up our level that we've been creating and take a few minutes to texture it. Alright, so now we're ready to go ahead and texture our level. Now we're not going to texture every single piece of this and align every single texture for the simple fact that that would take a lot of time. But let's go ahead and give this thing the general theme, if you will, that you guys saw earlier when we had the finished one open.
Okay, starting off, let's go and set a lot of this upper architecture to be more of a metallic look. So I'll start by loading up the texture browser. Under humanoid architecture, let's see, under floors, let's look and grab this metal floor is kind of nice looking. We'll make sure that's selected. And then we'll start selecting faces. Well, actually, let me put it on. Let's grab that face first. And let's say bring it back up, click it, and apply. Now, we've got one applied, but so we don't have to keep our texture browser open to keep applying this, I'm going to hold Alt and right-click, and then I should be able to Alt and left, and yes, it'll keep basically pasting that texture if you want to think of it that way. So I want to get this metallic look all the way around. So let me start clicking on all the various pieces up here, and you'll notice like sometimes you can use Shift B to grab all faces on that brush to speed up the selection sometime. And after you've selected them, you can hold Shift and left click, and that will apply the current texture that you grabbed with Alt right, and will apply to all selected faces.
Which is very handy, a real quick way of speeding you up.
Because notice in some of these where you have all this was made from one brush, you could do Shift B, still holding Shift, left click, and now that entire little rim in there is textured. So let me go around and keep selecting some of these and periodically using Shift to actually apply the texture. And go around and grab, let's say, I'll need to get the inside of the frames as well, but let me just keep going and grabbing a lot of these textures here. Shift B, holding Shift, keep clicking, and we'll keep going around and grab that. Let's say, or we could, some of these we could just hold Alt and click on whichever face and just let it grab. Like one face there would be fine, so we don't even have to select it first. We could just use Alt and left click. So select, in this case, select the whole brush, then Shift click, and continue doing this all the way around until we get a good chunk of this upper texture in this metallic, more of a metallic look. And Shift. Okay, and as you can see, we keep doing. Kind of repetitive, but necessary step.
Yeah, again, like I was saying earlier, this can be very tedious and a very lengthy progress. So we're just going to go through here and just get a good chunk of it textured, but not completely textured to perfection, if you will.
Exactly. So looking around, let's see. So actually, I should have grabbed the whole brush and applied. And sooner or later, we should be getting all the way around this thing.
Looks like you're just about there, to be honest with you.
Alright, let me grab a few faces I missed, just with a quick control, and start clicking on these faces to make sure that all the way around. Now I have a nice metallic look going. Let me grab the ceiling real quick, and apply to the ceiling. Let's see. And that whole central piece was made out of one brush, so Shift B will work nicely there, and grab the entire brush. And then hold Shift, click again. Okay, so that should take care of, well, everything except some of these window frames. I'll go ahead and do these as well just because it makes it look better. And same thing, 8 window frames, got to go around, grab a face, Shift B, holding Shift, click. So I'll just go around as quick as we can here and apply textures to all of these frames. Shift B, holding Shift, click. Click, and should be getting almost all the way around now. And let's see, B, click, and there we have the frames all nicely textured. So now the top part of all the architecture is starting to look somewhat better. It has more of a contrast to it.
Okay.
While I'm up in the top part of the level, let me grab that cone. Again, using Shift B because one brush was used to carve out the entire area. Let me bring my texture browser back up real quick and switch back to bases for just a second. Swing all the way down to the bottom, and let me grab this kind of rusty looking texture. See, that got applied? Now let me deselect those faces and go back to that floor that I was using, just in case there's more that we want to hit with that floor texture. So then let me scroll down a little, and okay. So we need to catch the bottoms, and we'll go ahead and grab the middle walls as well for that metal texture. So continue to do Shift click, and let's see. So we got some of the frames that we caught from above. We can just continue Alt left if we don't want to select. If you see like one big face that you want to click on and don't want to select it first, you can just Alt click on it. But in some cases where Alt click would only grab one, of course, using Shift B and then holding Shift and applying the texture. B. Okay, working our way around the bottom half of the arena now. Well, not bottom half, but the middle ledge. Grabbing these, and let's see. Okay. And pretty much the same thing for getting a lot of this textured in that metal texture. Let me look around. I've got just a few more of these to texture. Okay. Okay, that takes care of. Now I've got the good top half of the level now in that more of a contrasting metal look. Let's go ahead and turn our attention to the pillars now and put a texture with some more defining lines on it to make them look better. If you click on the pillar and hit Shift B, it selects everything except where that subtraction was. So you need to also Control select that. Here's something that's kind of interesting about the Shift B to select all faces on a brush. If I click this one face and then use Shift B, you'll notice it grabbed around and it actually grabbed the backside as well. Now I can hold Control, add one face to it. If I use Shift B again, it adds all the faces that belong to this brush while keeping the old faces still selected. So I could go around Control, Shift B, Control, hold Control if you miss and deselect, because you can toggle, like if I click that one, while still holding Control, toggle it back and grab the face I did want. Once I'm sure I have the face I want, then go to Shift B and grab all the remaining faces on that brush. So Control, Shift B. So 1.5 pillars left. Control. So just as long as you keep hitting the right faces, it's just a repetition of Control and Shift B until we have all of the pillars. One last time. All right. Let me go back to let's see. Load up a different floor texture now. Let's grab this floor texture. And if we close out the texture browser, now you see it looks okay on the sides, but on the front, you'll notice that the texture doesn't quite match up. So here's what I'll do to better align that. I'll grab just the front face, using Shift B again just to grab those outer faces so I keep those aligned together. Let me go run around and grab the remaining few faces, again using Control and Shift B, but this time just for that outer edge, because that's the part I want to realign. So Control, Shift B. And let me see, should be one more. Control, Shift B. Okay, so we've got all those outer edges selected. Now let's just right click, bring up the surface properties, and start panning it down a little, about 4 units at a time until it seems to match up, which would be right around there. There, now I have a much better alignment and the pillars look a lot better.
Very nice.
Okay. Now, let's see, I think I'll turn my attention to the floor real quick, and we'll use that same texture on the floor, just tiled a little bit higher. So I can use Alt, right-click on one of those pillars to grab that texture, then Alt, left, and start applying it to some of these faces on the floor. Now, since we're going to be needing to do an alignment, I'm just going to go ahead and start Control selecting these, because we're going to need to add these to a selection to do a single alignment on all of them. So now I'm just going to walk around here and grab all of the bottommost floor faces and continue on until I have basically what would represent the entire floor, so that I can align it so that it looks like one face. Let me see, get around, walk around here. Just holding Control now. If I use Shift B, I'm going to start getting into selecting my walls and then the walls on the inside here, which is why I'm just going through by hand and grabbing every piece to make sure I get exactly what I want in this case. So with these 13 surfaces selected, I could Shift and left click to grab and put that one texture on all of them. And then I'll go to Alignment, and we'll just say Planar with it set to Auto, and say Align. And that's the alignment we need. And then let's go ahead and scale them down by 0.5 so they tile twice as much. And there we have a floor texture.
Very nice.
Okay, so let me just grab back up into the upper levels just for a second here, and let me change the outer wall texture just to give a little bit better contrast when you're looking in through the windows. I'll start by grabbing the brushes that are used for our pipe connectors and using Shift B to grab each one. Then I'll come back and and grab the faces on the rest of the cylinders. Again, the reason I'm not using Shift B on the cylinder itself is then I would accidentally grab my floor and other parts of the wall that I don't want. So just real quickly here, Control Shift B to grab all these junction boxes. And now we have the junction boxes. I just need to grab the 8 remaining faces along the outside of the wall. So still holding Control, just grab all the remaining faces along the outside upper ring. Not too fast there. Okay.
Almost there.
Almost. Let's see, one face left. And now I can simply Shift, left click, and now I've got that texture with the nice tiling in it. Let's go ahead and align it. Let's try planar and see if that works. The auto should catch it okay. And there, that looks pretty good. So now with that texture, we could go down a level and...
Of course, I just want to point out, though, if we were doing this realistically for a professional grade level, then we wouldn't leave it like this. We would then go in there and we would still adjust these textures right here so that these lines of division between all the different tiles, lined up properly with the floor, the center line, and up at the top.
All right. On the second level, as a quick example, I could use a different texture and actually align it top and bottom if you wanted to take a look at that maybe.
Yeah, that's okay. I think we're starting to run pretty tight on time right here.
Okay.
And it's somewhat repetitive at this point.
Right.
So let's go ahead and go out there and perhaps throw some sort of texture on down at the bottom, up underneath the water.
Okay. So let me just move the camera right below the water surface. And if we just click once, and let's say, I guess we could just go ahead and grab all 8 faces real quick here. The Shift B would, yes, grab too much. So I'll just go grab all 8 faces. Whoops. And like such. Let me go and load up another texture. Out of humanoid architecture, let me load one of the grates in. And let's see here, let me load, say, the first grate. Let me take a look at that. Well, we definitely want to find one that doesn't allow you to look out into the level. So let me go and grab, let's see, maybe grate B. Yeah, that way it has a texture behind it. We won't get a Hall of Mirrors if you somehow manage to look below here. Also, I'm going to go ahead and align these. So if you look from above just a little bit more, it'll look better. Surface properties, and we can probably just do another planar align. And there, now we've got all the textures aligned properly.
Very good.
Okay, so that's got to... Okay, let me go grab these bottom faces real quick here and grab that metal texture. Again, Alt right so I can grab it, and then Alt left so I can apply it.
Okay.
And that pretty much, that gets a nice, a lot more contrast in there.
Exactly. Okay, well, obviously there's a lot more that we could do as far as textures are concerned. Working our way around, adding more textures, a different variation of textures, as we've not used that many, Logan, about 5 or 6 different textures in all?
Yeah, if that.
And, yeah, exactly. And we could also spend a while doing some more professional level editing as far as alignment is concerned. But again, the problem is it's time, and the idea is just to show you guys the basics, with this being Level Editor 101, and then you can then apply these principles to texturing your own levels, and then take that extra time to make it look really nice. So with that, I think this does a really good job of wrapping up just about a half-hour section on basic texturing, so that you guys can get out there and start texturing your own levels. So with that, thanks a lot.